Hi there and welcome back to the channel involving all things music direction. Now, about a year ago, I uploaded a video on very basic conducting technique. It's a video that I made basic in every sense of the word, deliberately. Principally for those that wanted to know a little bit more about what all this arm waving stuff is all about. It turned out to be one of the most searched for videos I've uploaded. But in this video, I want to expand on those basics, and it's really in a response to a recent email I had from a subscriber, but more about that shortly. I also want to explore more about an experience I had earlier this year while trying to follow a very experienced musician, but a very inexperienced music director that was conducting her first ever musical. So then, batons at the ready, let's talk conducting. If you haven't done so already, then please do subscribe by hitting the red button, and do let me know if there are any specific subjects you'd like me to cover, or you can email me directly here at musicdirectoronline@gmail.com. The basic conducting technique video I mentioned just now included a sequence illustrating how not to conduct, along with a sequence of professional classical conductors showing varying degrees of enthusiasm when conducting. One of the conductors in that sequence was the late great Leonard Bernstein. What better example of anyone who shows real emotion while conducting? A few weeks ago, I had an email from Candice Burrows. Candice was looking on YouTube for videos of conducting and stumbled across this particular basic video. She wrote, "Hello Rob, thank you so much for this. I am actually a classical singer and have my doctorate in vocal performance. I knew Leonard Bernstein very well as I was his mezzo soloist for his 70th birthday gala summer. We toured Europe, Russia and ended with a concert at the Proms." Candice then went on to say that she is now in her 60s and doesn't do a great deal of singing anymore. That's a pity. But recently she'd been offered a position of music director for an annual university musical where she now teaches. She did a smaller production, a Stephen Swartz musical last year, but that was just a rhythm section. But now she is working towards a production of Rodgers and Hammerstein's Cinderella with a much larger orchestra. She went on to say, "My concern is I will be conducting a bigger orchestra. I don't even know what to ask you, but I think I'm most concerned about making sure to know how to segue changing tempi or even meters." So let me try and answer some of these concerns and at the same time go over some basics of what conducting a musical is all about. Now, if you haven't done any conducting before, you could take a look at the video that I mentioned. There are numerous similar videos online, some of which go into a great deal more detail. Now, I could go into minute detail of what you should and shouldn't do as a conductor, but I'm not going to do that, because I strongly believe that if you cover the basics and you know the music well that you're working with, the vast majority of what the conductor needs to convey will come automatically. As a general rule, one hand is used for beating time and the other hand is free to do everything else. Now, some of you may think that that's a huge generalization, but it's very easy, I believe, to get bogged down in technique to the point when you're not interpreting the music at all. You're just becoming robotic. I'm right-handed, so I tend to beat time with my right hand, and all those other things, like cueing soloists or musicians, I leave to the left hand. Before we go any further, I'd like to examine what it is the conductor of any number of musicians or soloists or artists in general needs to be responsible for when conducting this genre we know as the musical. Number one might sound really obvious, but we are responsible, of course, for determining and setting the tempo. Secondly, and more actively during performance, of course, we are responsible for cueing the soloists, the musicians, the company as a whole. We're responsible for starting and stopping the music, of course we are, and usually changing tempo mid-number. One thing that more modern musicals are littered with these days, it seems, is musical vamps, and we're going to look at negotiating and managing such musical vamps. And finally, something I like to call leading through personal interpretation. Whatever the musical is that you're working on, the score that you will have been supplied will give an indication of tempo. You may have done some research and have listened to recordings of that particular musical and have an idea of how fast or otherwise the music should go. The question is, should you follow this? Don't have to. There's no rule to say that you should follow previous performance tempi. Most of us do, but in some instances, the way the number is being interpreted on stage by the director or the actor may mean that the indicated tempo isn't followed. You've rehearsed these numbers way before you're in front of any orchestra or band anyway, so the tempo, whatever it is, will be clear in your mind before you start beating. If it's a number, for instance, where the tempo is constant throughout, you can pay less attention to the beating of time and concentrate on what else you're responsible for. That is, keeping that connection with those on stage. I have a friend that lives nearby that is also a musical director, and I've known him while playing in his bands sometimes stop conducting altogether and just concentrate on those people on stage, giving them encouragement, cueing their entries, bringing them off when they need to stop singing because the pulse of the music is constant throughout, rather than just doing this all the time. Why not? While we're talking about this white stick, I've been asked many times, should we use a baton? Now, obviously, if you're playing from the keyboard, if you're conducting from the keyboard, I would say, obviously, you can't. But if it's purely a conducting role that you're doing, I like to have this. I used to use, for years and years, I used to use a pencil or a pen to conduct with, and then it broke. So, really, a baton is just an extension of your arm. It will help you be clearer in your movements, and it'll perhaps help things on the wrist. Anyway, we're talking about cueing soloists. Now, as I've said before, the right hand here, in this instance, we are beating time. The left hand also sometimes beats time. There's nothing wrong with that, but the left hand could also be used for cueing that soloist. Now, it could be, for instance, if the soloist's entry is on the downbeat or the first beat of a bar, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, whoa, away we go. It could be if you're on the second beat of the bar, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, and away we go. See, I bring up that hand just to emphasize the fact that now is when you start to sing. It could be on the third beat of the bar, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, and, or even it could be on the fourth. You know what I'm going to do now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, and as long as that entry point is much more exaggerated by using both hands, left and right hand, then your soloist should be cued. Also, as we're talking about cueing, don't forget the musicians in front of you, some of which, of course, may have been tacit for some time. Some of the musicals that we conduct may very well be the old standards, and the majority of your musicians may have played them numerous times. Even so, there's nothing wrong in still cueing them, as it will go a long way towards cementing that connection you have. You see that word again, that connection you have with all your performers. Starting and stopping the musical number is the one time when, of course, all musicians' eyes are on you. Now, that might sound slightly odd, as you think they should be looking at you all the time. No, absolutely not. If the music tempo is constant, now, although you'll be in their peripheral vision, they are likely to have eyes directly on you at the start, at the end, and when tempos change within the number. So then, with all eyes on you now, how do we start? Now, as I've said before, there are two things musicians need at the start of a number. Number one, how quick is the music going to go? And number two, of course, when do we start? Now, both of those pieces of information are conveyed through what I call the counting. Now, this nicely brings me to a friend of mine called Kate. Kate lives in the south of England and is an excellent and very experienced classical musician. And a few months ago, she conducted her first ever musical where, and in her own admittance, she struggled at times. I'll explain why in a moment, but I want to use that word that some people may think I overuse, and that's the word clarity. Now, I've mentioned this word many times in these videos, and it's always surrounding the subject of conducting. Classical musicians tend to mainly work with existing classical works in repertory. Now, well-known classical works where everyone is likely to know the tempo, the conductor is mainly concerned with interpretation of the work and less about how quick it's being played or conducting particular tempos. As a result of this, conductors of these works use their arms and their batons in a much more flowing and, dare I say it, less clear way when conducting. This was the way that Kate approached conducting her first musical, and this resulted in the lack of clarity, particularly when it came to countings. If the music, therefore, is, let's say, a regular 4/4 tempo, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. To start the music, we'll say at that tempo, we're going to give a 3/4, and then we go. So your 3/4 would be 3, 4, and start. What Kate would do, however, is, let me show you that again. Rather than, see, that's much clearer. If, for instance, the music needed to start on the upbeat on the 4th beat, then you would go, and away we go. May start on the 3rd beat, and away we go. The point I'm trying to make is that whether it's a large count-in or a small count-in is irrelevant. If you've said that on the start of this particular number that's in 4/4, I'll give you a 3/4, write it in your score that you're going to give a 3/4, because sure enough, the vast majority of your musicians will remember. And if you don't remember, you're not being consistent. So then, in this particular number that's going to be a fast 1/2, I'll give you a full bar in. So therefore, the tempo is going to be 1, 2, 1, 2, 2, 2, 3, 2. And I'll give you a bar in and 1, 2, and then it's nice and big to start. It could be in 3/4, and we're going to come in on the 3rd beat of the bar. So the tempo will be 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and I'll give you a 1, 2 to start. You've written it in your score, they've written it in your score, in their score, make sure you do. So therefore we have 1, 2, and away we go. I even find myself mouthing the numbers as well, rather than, it just adds to that clarity. Of course, another time when all eyes are on you is at the bring-off. Is that a term? when all the music and or singing stops. Let me demonstrate. So if for instance we're coming to the end of a piece that has a regular pulse to the music, in other words there's no pauses or rits or rals, it's just going to finish. My right hand would continue to beat the time, my left hand would be ready to stop everyone from singing and or playing. So we'd go 1, 2, 3, 4, here comes the last bar now, and stop. Very clear. It could be the case that there is, say, a pause bar over the top of the last note. So therefore you can keep it on as long as you wish. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and off. Very clear. If you want to be even clearer, you could have what I like to call the sweep off. So it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, hold, and off. Changing the tempo is, of course, another time when musicians have all eyes in your direction. Candice said that she was slightly unsure about how she should go about this. Well, the first thing to remember is that any such changes in tempo will already be indicated in the scores that all your musicians are reading anyway. How much of a change is really down to you. To reinforce these points in the music, I like to remind all concerned at the band or orchestra rehearsal that there is a ral or a rate at bar whatever which we will be observing, and point that out before the first playthrough at that rehearsal. Negotiating these passages can sometimes require some additional clarity. Sorry, that word again. For instance, if the number is taken at a medium tempo and it's going to slow down to, say, less than half that pace, it's sometimes necessary to double the beat. Let me demonstrate that subdivision. So it may be a case where the tempo is 1, 1, 2, 2, 2, and it's going to slow down to a stop. It's not quite as clear. So at a certain point in the music, you may say that you're going to subdivide the beats. So it would be 1, 2, 2, 2, 1, and 2, and stop. But remember, write it down in your score, explain at the band rehearsal that that's what you're going to do, make sure you always do it. Sometimes the tempo becomes so slow that maybe it's difficult for you to accurately indicate this in your conducting style. By that I mean it may be something, let's take it in 4, that's relatively slow, and it's going to slow virtually to the point of stopping, and I haven't got any more movement before we start again. That can be quite difficult to negotiate, and what I like to do what is called my curve technique. So for instance, let me do this at the side. So it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1. Do you see what I did there? So that last beat is a curve. You're basically just using more space to bring it down to the 1 again, rather than 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Just makes things clearer. It's also worth pointing out that if the music comes to a standstill momentarily and then starts again, depending on the length of the pause, you may need a small counting again to get things going. You really need to take this on a case-by-case basis. If the music stops rather than a pause on a held note, for instance, all eyes will be on you, so it's mainly just a case of starting again. But then, if the pause is longer, a small counting may be clearer. It's down to you. Whatever you decide, though, indicating in your score, make sure you do it every time. Music vamps are commonplace in many of the musical scores we use these days. It's a device to ensure that the music keeps on going even when passages of dialogue may have gone wrong on stage, or to give that little bit of flexibility. Things can go wrong on stage for all kinds of reasons. It could be 1 or 2 bar vamp, maybe a 4 bar repeated vamp. Either way, it's usually indicated in the same way. You would be conducting along. Let's take it a 4/4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and it keeps going round. It's a 1 bar vamp. Just keep my left hand facing down. As soon as we come out of the vamp, and then it's nice and big. Clarity again, you see. 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3. And away we go. Vamps I tend to conduct quite small because we're just waiting for something much bigger to indicate that we're going to be moving forward. Then that last bar, we're off again. Musical vamps. Occasionally the score may indicate that you have a 4 bar vamp that you can move out of at any time. This is more prevalent in more modern scores. Again, highlight this before the number is played at the band rehearsal so everyone can write it down and be ready to jump out of that vamp at the cue. It's also worth noting that the number of times any vamp passage is played is very likely to be the same, and this can easily be determined during the rehearsal process. If, for instance, a passage is played through 4 times, your company on stage will soon get used to the fact that this is only a certain length of time and are likely to adjust their action and or dialogue on stage to that 4 times accordingly. If this is the case, then just instruct the band that actually this isn't a vamp until ready. We're actually going to play it through 4 times, or however many times has been determined at the rehearsal. I can't do a video entitled Conducting a Musical without re-emphasising the inspiration and encouragement you can give your performers by just feeling the music. In many other videos, including this one by the way, I have talked a lot about offering so much more than just someone beating time. If that's all you do, in my opinion, you're not being a music director. How you conduct, the size of your beat, the body language that you use, the facial expressions that you use are all tools you need to incorporate to relay your passion for the music, and how that in turn enhances the storytelling. What you give in the way you lead the music is vital. It will add so much more to what you get from all your performers on stage or in the band or orchestra. If it's your first time in a conducting role and you know the music as well as you should, and you've not just turned into some beating machine, then you're well on your way to becoming a trusted member of the production team and leader of all things musical. Don't, whatever you do, get bogged down in technique. Be clear in your movements and instructions. If you said you're going to do something like a 2-beat count in, then write it down and make sure that you do it. Be consistent in all your directions. Show passion at all times and enjoy what you do. All those under your leadership will feel they're being supported and inspired to give their very best in every performance. See you next time.